The sun was sliding low over the far ridges, giving the open plains that old American glow that comes only at the end of a long day. The dry wind carried the smell of dust and pine, the kind of air a traveler breathed deep without meaning to. The land stretched wide in every direction, quiet enough that a man could hear the flap of a loose saddle strap or the creak of an old wagon board from several yards away. It was the sort of evening that usually settled a tired mind, but he felt the opposite. There was something unsettled in the silence, something watching, something waiting. He had been walking the same dirt trail since noon, boots coated with a thin layer of red powder, his coat hanging heavy on his shoulders. Folks in the small towns behind him had told stories earlier that week about a wild horse roaming the valley. Some said it was dangerous. Others said it was cursed. A few claimed it had been spotted near abandoned homesteads or wandering alone along the creeks with a strange look in its eyes. The traveler had learned long ago that most talk on the frontier was either stretched or soaked in old superstition. Still, he listened. Stories rarely grew without a little truth buried under them. As he walked, he felt something shift in the air behind him, a soft thud, then another, a rhythm. He turned slow, careful not to spook whatever was following. At first there was only wind and grass. Then he saw a dark shape step out from behind a cluster of pines, a horse, not saddled, not bridled, a wild mustang with a rough coat and a stare full of fire and worry all at once. The animal was bigger than any he had seen up close. Its ribs showed, but its muscles were strong. Its mane tangled, but its stance steady. It looked like a creature that had run too far and fought too much. He kept still, letting the dust settle. The mustang did not charge. It did not turn away either. It only watched him with a focus that made the hairs rise on his arms. There was something deliberate in the way it held his eyes, as if it was not here by chance. He eased his hand away from his belt to show he had no rope or weapon meant for it. The horse shifted its weight and snorted, sending a cloud of warm breath into the cooling air. Something about the sound made his chest tighten. It was not a warning. It was a plea. The horse took a step toward him, then another. It stopped only a few feet away, close enough for him to see the dried mud on its flank and a faint tremble in its legs. Most wild horses did not walk toward men without fear. They had been chased and captured too many times. But this one stood in front of him like it wanted something, needed something. The traveler lifted his palm slowly. The mustang did not flinch. If anything, it tilted its head, almost nudging the air between them as if urging him to notice something more. He spoke gently, voice low and steady. He asked what troubled the creature, though he expected no answer. The horse flicked its ears back toward the darkening ridge as if reacting to the words. Then it looked at him again, sharper this time. It stepped past him, walked a few paces down the trail, then turned its head toward him. The message was clear as daylight. Follow. He hesitated. The open plains were known for strange occurrences. Travelers had followed lights or shadows or odd sounds before, only to end up stranded or lost. Yet something about the mustang made him reconsider. It had sought him out, chosen him. The weight of that felt like more than chance. The horse stomped lightly, impatient. The sound echoed across the quiet land. He breathed deep, adjusted the strap on his pack, and followed. The mustang walked at a steady pace, occasionally looking back to make sure he was still behind. Its steps were sure, guiding him off the main road and into a narrow cut between the hills. The land grew different there, less open, more hidden. Rocks jutted out like old bones and small streams cut winding paths through the earth. The traveler felt the shift in his chest. This was no wandering horse leading him through chance. This was a creature that knew exactly where it wanted him to go. As they moved deeper into the hills, he noticed signs he had missed at first. Broken branches, fresh hoof prints. A small patch of fur snagged on a thorn bush. The mustang paused now and then to sniff the ground or listen to distant sounds he could not hear. Its breathing had grown uneven, as if carried by worry rather than exhaustion. The traveler felt the same tension coil in his stomach. Whatever they were headed toward was no simple thing. The sky darkened to purple and gold. The wind cooled. Crickets started their nightly chorus. The mustang slowed near a rocky slope and looked toward a shadowed gap between two boulders. The traveler followed its gaze. At first he saw nothing but darkness. Then he noticed a faint outline on the ground, half covered by dirt and leaves. His heart kicked. It looked like a trail of dragged footprints, human footprints. Someone had been pulled through here not long ago. The Mustang pawed the earth beside the prints. Its movements were sharp now, frustrated and afraid. The traveler crouched and brushed the dirt away with gentle fingers. The prints led deeper into the narrow passage. Whoever had made them had been struggling. Something about the way the earth was torn showed the fight had been desperate. He looked up at the horse. Its eyes were wet around the edges, glinting faintly in the dying light. The animal was not just guiding him. It was grieving. He stood again, scanning the dark passage ahead. The mountain air felt heavier, as if warning him of what lay beyond. The Mustang stepped closer, so near that its breath warmed his sleeve. He rested a hand on its neck, feeling the tremble under its skin. This horse had carried fear for miles. It had found him because it could not face what was ahead alone. The traveler swallowed hard. The plains behind them were safe and wide. He could turn back, pretend he had never seen the horse or the tracks or the silent plea in those wild eyes. But he knew he could not leave. Not when the animal had sought him out with such trust. Not when someone out there might still be alive. He nodded once, a quiet promise. The Mustang lifted its head as if it understood. They walked forward together, step by careful step, into the gap between the stones. The darkness grew thicker, swallowing the last light of the evening. The narrow path curved sharply, and the sound of dripping water echoed somewhere deeper inside the hidden passage. The air smelled damp and cold, a sharp contrast to the dry plains outside. The Mustang stopped suddenly. Its ears pressed flat, its muscles tightened. The traveler raised a hand, listening. There was a sound ahead, faint but real. A low groan mixed with a rustle, human, weak, close. His heartbeat pounded at his ribs. He took a step forward, but before he could move farther, the Mustang blocked his path. It stood stiff, eyes fixed on the darkness. Something else moved within that shadow, something heavier than a man. The traveler felt the weight of danger settle like a hand on his back. The groan came again, followed by a scraping noise that set his nerves on edge. The Mustang lifted its head high, nostrils flaring, warning him without a single sound. The traveler leaned forward, trying to see into the blackness. A shape shifted, large, silent, waiting. He tightened his grip on the strap of his pack, breath held. Whatever the Mustang had brought him to find was here. But so was whatever had caused the fear in the horse's trembling body and the drag marks in the dirt. The darkness ahead moved again, slow, deliberate, as if aware he had finally reached the place it wanted him least. Then something stepped forward. Not fully visible, not yet clear, but close enough that he felt the cold ripple of danger across his skin. He braced himself, heart hammering as the Mustang edged closer to his side. The truth of what the horse had been hiding was only a few steps ahead, waiting in the shadows. The traveler steadied his breath and tried to understand the shape ahead. The faint glow from the sky behind him barely reached into the narrow passage, but enough light slipped through to outline the rough curve of something broad and low to the ground. He felt the Mustang tense beside him, ready to bolt or defend if needed. The air smelled old, as if the rocks had trapped the scent of something that had passed through recently. He listened again for the groan, but the sound had gone still. He moved one cautious step forward, letting his boot land softly. The Mustang followed, its hoofs scraping lightly against the stone. The shape ahead shifted, scraping against the ground with a weight that sent vibrations through the packed soil. He felt his pulse run faster. The thing in the shadows was not coming toward them, but it was not backing away either. It felt like something wounded or guarding something precious or dangerous. The traveler knew he could not turn back now, not after following the horse through the long stretch of plains and into these hidden hills. The Mustang's trust in him hung heavy on his shoulders. He had seen fear in many animals over the years, but never a wild one that searched a man out for help. Something out here had pushed the Mustang past its breaking point. Something real. Something serious. He crouched low to steady his eyes and let them adjust. The shadows leaned and stretched as the wind shifted. He could make out what looked like broken branches and maybe a piece of torn cloth stuck on a rock. It made the hollow press tighter against his ribs. The drag marks they had followed from the outside told him a person had been pulled through here, but by who? Or what? And why would the horse know about it? The Mustang made a soft, uneasy whine, lowering its head as if urging the traveler to notice something closer to the ground. He let his gaze fall to the dirt. There were hoof prints here, but not from the Mustang. These were smaller, sharper, and set deep as if the creature had been running hard. There were also faint lines in the dirt, the kind made by a rope or cloth. Whatever happened here had not been clean or quick. He set his hand on the Mustang's neck, hoping to calm it. The warmth under the tangled mane reminded him that the animal had been through something painful before finding him. He wondered how far the horse had run. How long it had been searching for someone who could understand what it wanted. The thought made his throat tighten. This Mustang was no ordinary creature of the plains. It carried purpose. A breeze swept through the passage and pushed the shadows back just enough for him to see the shape ahead more clearly. Relief hit him first, then concern. It was a large fallen log wedged between two rocks. He let out a shaky breath. At least it was not some creature lurking in wait. But the relief lasted only a moment. Behind the log lay something else. Something curled. Something still. He approached slowly. The Mustang followed, shaking slightly with each step. As he got closer, the outline of the figure sharpened. A person lay half hidden by the dirt and stones. The traveler dropped to one knee and brushed away debris with his sleeve. A man, face pale, clothes torn at the shoulder. His hands were bound by a rough strip of leather. His breaths were shallow, but he was alive. Before he could check further, the Mustang stepped back quickly, ears flicking. The traveler looked up fast, scanning the dark hollow around them. The wind picked up again. A faint rattle echoed somewhere deeper in the stone corridor. It was not the wind, it was too steady, too heavy, like footsteps dragging over the ground. He stood and positioned himself between the unconscious man and the sound. The Mustang moved beside him, its body braced, ready to defend. The sound grew louder. Something was coming toward them, slowly, purposefully. Every instinct in the traveler told him to grab the injured man and run, but the passage behind them was narrow and steep. They would never outrun anything that moved well in the dark. He stepped back to the fallen man and checked for injuries. The bruises were fresh, the rope marks deep. This was no accident. Someone had done this to him. But why would they leave him alive? And why would the Mustang be so desperate to bring help, unless it had seen what happened? Or been chased by the same person who did this? He tried to lift the man's head, but the Mustang stopped him with a nudge, pushing his hand toward a different spot near the man's waist. The traveler looked and found a small leather pouch barely peeking from beneath the torn shirt. He slid it out carefully. The pouch was old but well kept. Inside, he found a folded piece of fabric with strange markings stitched into it. Shapes, lines, patterns that looked like a map but not of any place he recognized. The cloth had stains along one edge, faded, but there. Someone had held on to this for a long time. He folded the cloth back into the pouch and tucked it into his coat pocket, unsure why the Mustang wanted him to find it. The animal paced anxiously, gaze fixed on the deeper shadows. The dragging sound came again, closer now. The traveler moved his hand near a small pocket knife at his belt. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. The air grew colder as the sound neared. The rocks felt less like shelter and more like traps. Then the sound stopped completely. The silence that followed felt wrong, too sharp, like the world was holding its breath. The traveler waited, every muscle tight. The Mustang snorted and backed up, brushing against the wall of the passage. A soft clatter echoed behind them. The traveler spun around. A rock rolled across the ground as if knocked by something small. He searched the shadows for movement. Nothing. Another rock dropped from a ledge above. The Mustang's body lowered, ready to bolt. The traveler squinted at the ridge above the passage. He could barely make out a faint outline, maybe an animal, maybe something else. Whatever it was, it watched them without moving. He turned back to the injured man. They needed to get out of this narrow gap before whatever watched them decided to come closer. He slid his arms under the man's shoulders, lifting with slow care. The man groaned weakly. The sound echoed off the stone walls. It was enough to stir whatever lurked above. A low whisper of movement ran across the ridge. Pebbles rained down. The traveler shielded the man's head and braced himself for anything to leap out, but nothing came. The watching shape shifted back, almost as if retreating, almost as if waiting for them to move first. The Mustang nudged the traveler firmly and then stepped toward the opening they had come from, looking back with urgency. The message was clear: leave now, before the narrow space trapped them with whatever lurked beyond. He adjusted his grip on the injured man and followed the Mustang slowly toward the entrance. Every few steps he checked behind them. The shadows did not move, but he could feel eyes on his back, watching, tracking. The air grew warmer as they neared the outside. The sky had dimmed into deep blue, but the open plains felt safer than the hidden stone passage. When they reached the mouth of the gap, the Mustang stopped and looked back one last time, ears stiff and alert. Something in the passage gave a faint scrape, like claws or boots sliding on stone. The traveler hurried several steps away from the rocks, carrying the man with heavy effort. He laid him down gently near a patch of dry grass. The Mustang circled them, still tense, scanning the hills behind. The traveler grabbed his canteen and poured a little water onto a cloth, then dabbed it against the man's forehead. The man stirred weakly, mumbling something the traveler could not understand. The Mustang lowered its head beside the fallen man, breathing softly against his shoulder. The gesture held grief and hope tangled together. The traveler felt the weight of the mystery settle deeper in his chest. Whoever this man was, he was important to the Mustang, maybe even connected to why the horse had risked everything to find help. Before he could question further, the injured man forced his eyes open. His voice was raw and barely a whisper. He tried to speak, but only a few broken words escaped, full of fear and warning. The traveler leaned closer to hear him, knowing these words might explain everything. But the man's voice weakened again, and his eyes drifted shut before the sentence could form. The Mustang lifted its head sharply, ears turning toward the hills as if it understood the part of the message that never reached the traveler's ears. Something was coming for them. And whatever it was, the Mustang had not brought the traveler here to solve the danger. It had brought him because the real threat had only begun. The traveler stayed close to the fallen man, feeling the pull of responsibility tighten around him. The Mustang stayed on edge, pacing in short circles and lifting its head toward the dark ridges as if expecting something to come crawling out at any moment. The grass around them swayed under the growing night wind, and the sky stretched wide overhead with a thin wash of fading blue. It should have felt open and safe, but nothing about the plains felt comforting anymore. Not after what they had seen in the rocks. The man on the ground shifted and let out a weak sound, half pain and half warning. The traveler leaned in again, listening for anything that might give a clue about who had attacked him or what they wanted. Instead of words, the man's hand reached toward the traveler's coat pocket, searching shakily for the pouch the Mustang had made him take. It was a clumsy movement, but the intent was clear. The cloth inside the pouch mattered. Maybe it was what had gotten him hurt in the first place. The traveler pulled the pouch out and held it where the man could see it. The injured man stared at it with a mix of fear and urgency, trying again to speak. Only a faint rasp escaped. The traveler lowered his voice and promised he would find a way to understand, though he knew the promise was thin. The man's eyes drifted shut again, worn out from even that small effort. The Mustang nudged the man's boot, as if urging him to stay awake, then swung its head toward the hills again. Its ears twitched at every small noise. The traveler followed its gaze, but the ridges only showed shadows stacked on shadows. Still, he felt the invisible weight of something watching them. The memory of the scraping sound from the passage clung to him like a cold hand on the back of his neck. He moved a little closer to the Mustang, trying to read its body more clearly. The horse's movements were sharper now, not from exhaustion but from warning. It shifted its weight and stepped toward the man, then toward the traveler, then toward the distant hills, as if caught between protecting them and urging them to flee. The traveler felt the knot in his stomach twist. Whatever had attacked the man was not far. And it was not done. He turned back to the injured man and inspected the rope marks again. They were deep and angry, the kind left by someone who meant to drag him a long distance. The torn clothes and bruises suggested a struggle, but not a hurried one. This attack had not been a moment of desperate violence. It had been deliberate, planned. The pouch with the cloth inside only added another layer to the strange puzzle growing around them. The traveler opened the pouch again and unfolded the cloth. Even in dim light, the markings caught his attention. They were stitched in dark thread, forming shapes that looked like a map, but not like any he had seen among the towns or plains. It had circular paths, lines moving in odd angles, and symbols that almost looked like they were meant to hide something rather than reveal it. The cloth felt old, older than the injured man, older than the Mustang even. He studied it quietly, trying to understand it from different angles. The more he looked, the more he sensed it was not a simple guide. It was some kind of code. It might show a trail or territory or something hidden deep within the hills. The Mustang stepped closer and sniffed the cloth carefully. When it recognized the scent, it snorted softly and backed up with unease. The traveler realized the horse had seen this cloth before. Maybe it belonged to the injured man, or maybe to whoever had left him for dead. Before he could think further, a sharp crack echoed from the hills like a loose stone kicked by something heavy. The Mustang lifted its head instantly. The traveler stuffed the cloth back into the pouch and scanned the ridges. The night had nearly taken over the sky, leaving only the faintest glow around the distant horizon. The shadows in the rocky slopes felt alive, moving, pressing in. He reached for his small pocket knife and checked the blade. It was hardly enough to fend off anything dangerous, but he would use whatever he had. The Mustang stood beside him, ready to defend the fallen man with its entire body if needed. The traveler thought of dragging the injured man toward a safer place, but the plains offered no true shelter. The closest sign of life was miles away, and moving the man too roughly might cause more harm than help. He needed a plan, but plans rarely came easy when danger breathed at the edge of the dark. He checked the man's pockets carefully, hoping for more clues. He found a small wooden button, carved with a strange pattern that seemed to match the symbols on the cloth. He also found a thin leather strap that must have once held something important. The strap was broken, frayed at the edges. Whatever had been attached to it was missing, stolen. Maybe that was the reason behind all of this. The traveler tucked the items away and leaned back, trying to put the pieces together. A wild Mustang searching for help. A stranger dragged through the hills. A cloth that looked like a coded map. A missing item. A threat hiding in the shadows. The puzzle formed a shape, but not one he could name yet. The Mustang suddenly stomped the ground and moved toward the traveler with urgent force. Its body pressed against him, not in fear but in warning. Then the wind carried a faint sound from the hills, low and drawn out, almost like a call. It was not the cry of an animal he recognized. It was not human either. It was something between the two, strained and rough, echoing across the stone. The traveler tightened his grip on the knife. The sound came again, nearer this time. The injured man stirred and whispered a single word that broke through his weak voice. The traveler leaned close, desperate to catch it. The word was faint but sharp enough to send a chill through him. It was not a name, not a place. It was a warning, a word shaped by fear. The Mustang reacted instantly, stepping protectively over the man again. The traveler rose to his feet and stared into the dark where the sound had come from. He could not see anything, but the night felt thicker than before, as if something large moved among the rocks, hiding just out of sight. He knew then that whatever hunted the injured man had not given up. It was tracking them, waiting for the right moment to step into the open, and it had no fear of following them onto the plains. He gathered what little courage he could and turned toward the Mustang. The horse met his eyes with a steady gaze, full of determination and fear tangled together. The traveler felt the understanding pass between them. They were not just tending to an injured stranger. They were protecting something greater, something someone wanted badly enough to chase through the hills. The traveler looked toward the direction of the nearest distant settlement. It would take hours to reach it, even without carrying another man. But staying here would only get them trapped. They had to move. Not quickly, but quietly, carefully, without drawing attention to themselves. He lifted the injured man again, strain pulling at his shoulders. The Mustang stayed beside him, close enough to steady the man's weight when the traveler stumbled. Every sound in the night echoed louder now, every shadow felt deeper. The distant call came one more time, but softer, almost testing the wind. As they moved away from the rocky hills, the traveler felt the weight of the coated cloth in his coat pocket. Its symbols pressed against him like a secret he had no choice but to carry. Whatever lay hidden in those patterns was worth enough danger to put the man's life in jeopardy and scare a wild horse half out of its senses. The plains stretched ahead, wide and open, but no longer comforting. Danger had followed them out of the hills, lingering at their backs. The traveler walked on, the Mustang guarding one side and the shadows watching the other. Somewhere behind them, the thing that had dragged the man through the stones was tracking every step they took. And it was only getting closer. The night settled deeper around them as they crossed the open plain, the air cooling fast and the quiet turning heavy. The traveler could feel each breath of the injured man against his shoulder, faint and uneven, like he was holding on with the last thread of strength he had left. The Mustang stayed close on the other side, matching every step, eyes scanning the darkness with sharp attention. Even in the growing chill, sweat dampened the traveler's back. He kept expecting the sound from the hills to rise again, that strange call that did not belong to any creature he knew. But for now, the plains held only silence. That silence did not comfort him. It felt too controlled, too hollow, like something had followed them out of the rocky passage and now moved just slow enough to avoid being heard. The Mustang felt it too. Every few steps, the horse lifted its head, ears turning like they caught sounds the traveler could not. The tension clung to them like a shadow, stretching long across the empty land. He adjusted his grip on the injured man and kept walking. The nearest settlement was still hours away, but the land ahead was flat, and once the sun rose, they could be seen from far off. That should have made him feel safer. Instead, it made him worry about who else might see them first. The moon climbed higher, casting a pale wash over the plains. Under that faint light, the traveler could finally see more of the man's condition. The bruises were darker now, and the rope marks looked raw. Whoever had tied him had done it with purpose, not care. The traveler wondered again what the man had been carrying before the strap broke. Something valuable. Something dangerous. Something someone was willing to chase across the wilderness. He found himself glancing at the pouch in his coat again. The cloth inside felt alive with meaning he couldn't yet grasp. The symbols and shapes had burned themselves into his memory. The Mustang had reacted to the cloth like it knew its scent, its story. Maybe the injured man's words, though broken, had tried to warn him about that very thing. The Mustang let out a low breath, almost a grumble, and nudged the traveler's arm, urging him to look to the left. There, far off in the distance, a new shape moved across the horizon. It was low and steady, like someone riding or walking with purpose. The traveler squinted, but the moonlight wasn't enough to reveal anything else. The figure didn't hurry. It simply moved, following the same direction they were traveling, but from a distance that kept it unknown. The traveler felt the Mustang stiffen again. The horse stepped closer to him, protecting the injured man with its body. Whatever that figure was, the Mustang did not trust it. The traveler whispered to the horse, trying to calm it, but he knew the unsettled feeling in his own chest was growing. They were being watched from more than one place now. Perhaps chased from behind, and now perhaps tracked from the front. He kept walking, steady and quiet. The ground felt like it was stretching out longer with every step, as if the settlement moved farther away rather than closer. The injured man stirred again, trying to speak. His voice was so faint the traveler had to lean close to hear anything. A single word escaped, strained and frightened, but still too soft to understand. Then his eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and fear, before rolling shut again. The Mustang let out a nervous huff. The traveler lifted his head to study the plains again. The figure in the distance had stopped moving. It stood still now, almost blending into the land, waiting, watching. He felt the pressure of the moment rise. Something about that figure's stillness made him think it was not the same person or thing that had been in the rocky passage. This one moved differently, slower, more patient. But not friendly. A surge of wind swept across the plains, carrying with it a faint sound, distant but clear. The traveler froze. The Mustang's ears shot up. It was the same dragging noise they had heard earlier, but this time it carried across the open space, not hidden in stone. Whatever had stalked them in the hills had not stayed behind. It had followed them onto the plains. The traveler quickened his pace, adjusting the man's weight. His arms burned, but he pushed forward. The Mustang stayed tight at his side, muscles ready to react. The dragging sound came again, closer. The figure on the horizon shifted as if it too heard the noise. The traveler felt trapped between two unseen threats. The plains were too open. There was nowhere to hide. No rocks to shield them, no trees to conceal them. Only grass stretching in every direction, rustling under the wind like whispers. He scanned the land and spotted a low dip ahead, where the earth sank into an old dried stream. It wasn't perfect, but it offered at least a little cover. He headed toward it with the Mustang following tight. The injured man groaned, but the traveler whispered a promise that they would stop soon. When they reached the dip, the traveler lowered the man onto a softer patch of dirt and knelt beside him. His breaths were growing weaker, and the bruises along his ribs looked worse in the moonlight. The Mustang lowered its head and nuzzled the man gently, almost pleading for him to stay awake. The traveler checked the man's pulse again, steady but faint. Whoever had done this had meant to break him slowly. That thought tightened the traveler's gut. This wasn't a random attack. It was something bigger. He lifted his head, searching the plains again. The figure on the horizon was moving now, heading toward them at a steady pace. The dragging sound behind them grew clearer, like something scraping across the dry grass. They were caught in the middle of two approaching dangers. The traveler reached into his coat and pulled out the pouch again. The Mustang's eyes followed the movement. The cloth inside was more than a map. It felt like the reason behind everything: the man's injuries, the Mustang's desperation, the shadow in the rocks, the figure on the horizon. He unfolded the cloth, letting the moonlight fall across the stitched symbols. The lines twisted and curved in strange ways, forming paths that didn't match the land around them. But as he studied it more, he noticed something he missed before. The shapes weren't random. They resembled landmarks, but drawn in a way that hid their true form unless viewed at a different angle. The dried stream they stood in might have been one of the shapes. A curve in the cloth matched it almost perfectly. The traveler felt his breath catch. Maybe the cloth was not just a map, but a key. And if the injured man had been carrying it, someone wanted that key. The Mustang suddenly stomped the ground and swung its head sharply toward the horizon again. The figure approaching was closer now, still too far to identify, but close enough to sense intention. The traveler rose slowly, his body tight with uncertainty. The dragging sound behind them grew louder, closer, no longer masked by distance. Something was moving through the grass, drawn by the injured man or by the cloth. The traveler felt the Mustang brush against him again, steady and strong despite its earlier fear. It wasn't running. It wasn't backing down. It was ready to defend something: the man, the cloth, the truth hidden in those strange symbols. The traveler took a deep breath, steadying himself. The plains around them trembled with tension, two threats closing in. One injured man fighting to breathe, a coated cloth that carried secrets no one had yet understood, and a wild Mustang that refused to give up. He turned back to the man, who stirred again as if sensing the danger rising around them. The traveler whispered that he would protect him. He would protect whatever this cloth meant. But the man's eyes opened just enough to show a flicker of fear, as if he understood something the traveler didn't, as if he knew what was coming next. The dragging sound stopped suddenly. The figure on the horizon did too. The plains went silent. The Mustang took one step forward, placing itself between the traveler and the darkness, slowly pressing in. Whatever was about to happen was close. Too close. And it was the moment everything would begin to break open. The moment the wagon's wheel broke free and clattered down the rocky slope, the man's heart kicked hard in his chest. He pulled back on the reins, forcing the mule to stop before the whole load tipped. The wild horse made a quick circle around him, pawing the ground and tossing its head as if urging him to move fast. Dust rose from the uneven trail, drifting through the air like a thin brown veil. He felt the heat on his neck, the dry sting of the wind, and the weight of everything that had led them to this moment. For a breath, he feared the horse's warning had come too late, but he steadied himself and stepped down to check the damage, knowing the moment of truth was finally here. The wheel was splintered, the axle cracked, and the slope beside the trail was beginning to slide. Small stones rolled down in steady trickles. The horse kept glancing up toward the ridge, restless, as if expecting something to happen. He remembered the way the animal had led him across the hidden path and how it had paused earlier on the journey, ears twitching at distant sounds he could not hear. Now he finally sensed the same thing. The land felt tense, like it was holding its breath. He worked fast, grabbing the spare boards he carried for repairs, shaping them with the hatchet, and pressing them into place. The wild horse nudged him once, almost impatient, but he whispered for it to hold steady just a little longer. His hands shook, not from fear, but from a growing understanding that whatever the horse had been hiding all along was close. He had felt it in every step since the moment the animal first followed him out of the grassland. He had sensed it in the broken tracks he found along the valley floor, and in the strange silence that settled in the evenings when they camped. As he secured the wheel back onto the frame, the horse suddenly jerked its head toward the ridge again. This time he heard the faint sound too. A soft, uneven cry, weak, strained, not human, not fully animal, something in between. He froze for a moment, then rose to his feet slowly, staring into the distance. The wild horse stepped forward, looked back at him, and then took a few careful strides up the trail. It wasn't darting or anxious now. It moved with purpose, steady, clear. It wanted him to follow. He tied off the mule, grabbed his canteen, and walked with the wild horse leading the way. The air grew cooler as they moved between the rocks and brush. The sun dropped lower, giving the whole land a golden tint. The horse walked with a pace that spoke of trust. Not the kind earned easily, but the kind formed through shared miles, shared worries, and shared danger. He felt strangely grateful for the bond, though he knew it all came from something deeper the horse had kept hidden. They reached a narrow pass where the trail opened into a small, sheltered hollow between two tall stone walls. There, tucked against the shade, he finally saw what the horse had been guarding all this time. A young foal lay curled on the ground, breathing shallow and slow. Its coat was marked with dust, and its thin legs trembled when it tried to lift its head. The man's breath caught in his throat. All the fear and confusion of the past days finally came together in this single moment of truth. The wild horse stepped beside the foal, lowering its head, brushing its nose against the young one in a gentle, comforting touch. The man knelt near them, careful not to startle either. Now he understood why the horse had followed him for help, why it had watched him from afar, why it had warned him of dangers on the trail. The foal needed care, more than the wild could offer. He opened his pack, pulling out the clean cloth and a small tin of salve he always carried. He offered the wild horse a calm voice, letting it see he meant no harm. The horse watched him closely, but it did not pull away. He touched the foal's side, feeling the weak rise and fall of its breath. The foal blinked up at him with tired eyes, as if too drained to be afraid. The soft wind carried the smell of brush and earth through the hollow as he cleaned the foal's wounds. Some were small scrapes. Others were deeper, likely from slipping along the rough terrain. He worked slowly, giving the wild horse time to watch every move. When he lifted the foal's head, offering a small sip of water, the wild horse nudged the foal gently, urging it to drink. The moment felt sacred in its own quiet way, like the land itself had opened a hidden door for him alone. But as comforting as the scene was, he could not ignore the growing sense of urgency. The foal needed shelter, food, protection, and this hollow, for all its peace, would not keep them safe for long. Tracks he noticed earlier along the ridge came back to his mind, the kind of tracks that meant someone or something else had been moving nearby. He sensed it again now, an uneasy shift in the wind and the faint echo of distant movement. Something was out there, and it was getting closer. The wild horse lifted its head, ears turning sharply. The man rose slowly, scanning the ridge, though the shadows made it hard to see anything clearly. He placed a reassuring hand on the wild horse's shoulder and whispered that everything would be all right. hoping his own uncertainty didn't show. He returned to the foal, lifting it gently. Its legs folded weakly beneath it, but he supported its weight, cradling it with steady arms. The wild horse stayed close, touching the foal's neck, nudging it, letting it know it was safe. Together they took a few steps toward the narrow pass again. The foal trembled, but it didn't resist. It trusted the man as deeply as its parent now trusted him. As they stepped back onto the trail, he felt the land grow quiet again, but this time it was a silence filled with warning rather than peace. The wild horse stayed alert, its muscles tense, its breathing sharp. The man held the foal close and kept moving, feeling the weight of responsibility settle deeper on his shoulders. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to turn back. The trail curved downward, leading toward the valley where his small cabin stood waiting beyond the cottonwood trees. If they could get there before dark, he could tend to the foal properly. But the sun was falling fast, and the shadows were stretching across the land like long dark fingers. The wind carried a faint cry again, but this time it sounded closer, urgent, and unclear. He kept walking, feeling the path shift under his boots, but he never slowed. The wild horse walked beside him with determined steps. The foal rested against his arms, its breath warm on his shirt. Every part of him knew this journey had suddenly become far more important than anything he had faced in recent years. Whatever had harmed the foal was still somewhere behind them. Whatever had driven the horse to seek him out was still unresolved. But he also felt hope rising, quiet and steady. Hope that he could protect these animals. Hope that the valley ahead held the safety they needed. Hope that all the days leading to this moment had shaped him into someone ready for what came next. As they neared the last bend in the trail, a sudden sound cracked through the air, sharp and startling. The wild horse jerked its head. The foal trembled in his arms. The man stopped, heart pounding hard as he looked toward the shadows gathering near the ridge. Something moved there, slow, heavy, close enough to see the shape but not the face. Close enough to know this was the moment everything had been building toward. He held the foal tighter and took a cautious step back, the wild horse shifting its weight to stand between him and the figure. The setting sun lit the edge of the ridge with a fading gold glow, and the shape moved again, heading toward them with a steady pace that filled the air with tension. And as the wind settled into a deep quiet, the man realized he was finally about to understand. The last and most dangerous part of what the wild horse had been hiding all along.